Losing is never fun, but sometimes it's necessary. Now in the case of superheroes though, losing has grander consequences and implications than the regular mere mortal screwing up does. So today we are taking a closer look at those defeats that shook the comic book world. We're counting down the top 10 superheroes who lost. Now some of these losses are flat out embarrassing while others are iconic and character defining. So with that in mind, let's get to our list. But don't forget to stick around till the end of the video to let us know what other superhero defeats and losses you think should have made our list. Now let's jump in. And at number 10, Aquaman and his hand. Oh, let's start off this loss list with a very literal physical loss. Oh, poor Arthur Curry. The hook didn't help his image much, did it? Once upon a time, Aquaman fought a villain called Charybdis, who not only forced the aquatic hero to lose his hand thanks to sticking his whole arm in a river full of hungry piranhas, but he also stole Arthur's ability to communicate with sea life, all as a means to poison the earth. That's like Aquaman's thing. That's so mean. That's like going up to Superman being like, I'ma take your ability to fly and not suck, you know? That's Aquaman's big thing. He can talk to fish. Or, sorry, psychically influence them. Now there's nothing like seeing a superhero's bones practically sucked clean of flesh to signify a pretty big loss. Aquaman may have won the battle. He does throw his foe into the same river, letting the piranhas annihilate him whole, but it is still a devastating defeat when you come back from a battle with only one hand intact, that is for sure. Moving on to number 9, something just as grim, Elektra's death. Here we have an instance of a time in comic book history where a villain succeeded in murdering a superhero. In this case, it is Bullseye skewering Elektra with her own weapon in Daredevil issue 181. At the time of the release, it was considered to be one of the most graphic depictions of violence post-Comics Code Authority. The panels depicting the aftermath are even harder to read, with Elektra's blood spilling out of her and her crawling her way to Matt Murdock's doorstep, where she dies in his arms. She eventually would be resurrected, because who isn't these days? But the death of this anti-hero is definitely one that has managed to stick in readers' minds for decades. And I mean, technically she was still kind of a villain at that time, but we're letting that slide. And at number 8, Superman vs. Venom. So when you hear that matchup, you might assume that, Superman might have the advantage. He's the Man of Steel, he wins like all the time. You would probably even guess that he defeated Marvel's parasitic symbiote creature. Well, once upon a time, in the 1996 DC vs. Marvel crossover, specifically DC Marvel All Access issue number 1, the Man of Steel had his butt handed to him when Venom used his symbiote slime to practically suffocate Supes, getting into his eyes and mouth after Venom slaps him around a bit and also bites him a lot. This all goes down when Superman tries to interfere in a duel between Venom and Spider-Man, so Venom shows him who runs this town. It's also during that time period where Superman had a mullet, so really, this is kind of his own fault. Can you blame Venom? Yeah. Look at that mullet. And at number 7, Pantha and Superboy. Now this loss is one of the most shocking deaths to occur on our list. Now back in Infinite Crisis, DC killed off Pantha in one of the most volatile ways possible. She literally jumped in behind Superboy-Prime, who, to be fair, was incredibly distracted and absolutely mental at that moment. He turned around and then punched her head off. Yeah, he punched her head off. Like, yeah. Her head exploded, it was not pretty. Sure, it is one hell of a way to go that, yeah, is kind of memorable and probably didn't hurt much past the initial split-second impact, thankfully, but that is definitely one way to suffer a defeat, especially an unexpected one. And at number 6, Doctor Strange and his cape. Here's another one of those more embarrassing defeats, and it comes from one of Marvel's alternate universes this time, the 1610 Ultimates universe. For those of you who don't know, the Ultimate Universe reimagines all of Marvel's characters in a more modern, more grim way. It was beloved, until its penultimate event. No pun intended. Titled Ultimatum, many readers felt that this story arc brought about the end of the 1610 universe, and ruined much of what they loved about it. There's some pretty whack stuff that occurs in this arc, and many characters die in gruesome ways, including Doctor Strange. When facing off against his foe Dormammu, the demon causes Strange's cape to wrap itself around him, constricting him, to the point where it is so darn tight that his head turns purple and explodes, killing the master of mystical arts. Yeah. Lots of exploding heads on this list. Moving on. And at number 5, Jason Todd. Oh, Jason Todd. After Crisis on Infinite Earths, when Todd, the second Robin, got a character makeover that made him more street, he was thrust into a controversial storyline in which DC readers could call in to determine his fate. Now, for context, Todd was investigating his biological mother in the story, who he tracks down in Ethiopia. The Joker finds out about this, and starts to blackmail the kid over providing his mother medical supplies that she is in dire need of. But turns out his mom was actually embezzling money from an aid agency pregnancy as part of a cover-up. She then turns her own son over to the Joker. And what the Joker did next was the result of the calling and gimmick going haywire. The Joker brutally beats Jason to death with a crowbar. Now it turns out in real life, one dude had programmed his computer to call into DC on repeat, with the answer no, as in no, Jason Todd should not live, which drastically changed the poll's results, and actually is kind of another loss for Jason in itself. And really, if you think about it, it's actually a triple loss, because Jason lost again when he got replaced by Tim Drake, so overall, you know, tough time for little Jason. He was brought back to life, so I don't feel as bad. Speaking of death, in at number 4, Captain America and Civil War. At the end of the first Civil War story arc, Captain America loses not only the war, but his life too. Yikes. This goes down in the Civil War epilogue titled The Death of Captain America. After the hero surrendered to Tony Stark's Iron Man and was arrested, things went pretty much downhill fast for the beloved character. While in prison, Red Skull hires villain Crossbones to assassinate Rogers, who goes after him on his way to the courthouse for his trial. Crossbones proceeds to snipe Cap in the back of his neck and stomach, which kills him, or at least killing him for the time being, that is. He came back, and actually we sort of have our next number to thank for that death trend. In at number 3, the death of Superman. Oh, surprise surprise, Kelly puts the death of Superman on a top 10 nerd list again. Wow. To all of you Nerd Squad peeps out there, I'm not sorry. I also don't hate Superman, for the record. It's just that the story arc is so baffling and so very much a cash grab on DC's part that it's hard to ignore. Plus it had major consequences on the comic book industry, which, personally, I do love me some historical context. Now for those of you who are like, sorry, what's the big deal here? What's the death of Superman? Well, A, I talk about it a lot, and B, allow me to introduce it to you, friend. The death of Superman, in short, was a story arc in 1993 in which Superman faced off against Doomsday in a literal punching match, and it resulted in both of their deaths. Not only was the comic book world shook by this, but it was big news in pop culture that Superman had been killed off. Until DC was like, psych, he's still alive, he just fell into a Kryptonian coma, which looks like he's dead, but he's not. And by the way, thanks for the $3 million this issue made us on its first day. The comic sold 6 million copies, and when it was revealed that Superman was actually alive, many felt betrayed by DC, voicing that the arc felt like a publicity stunt, which yeah, it was. It also drastically changed the way that comic book writers treat death in the medium. The number of characters who died and were brought back after that 1993 comic exponentially increased. So yeah, no hate on Superman, minus his mullet. Just a lot of dislike of that era in DC's history. Up next at number 2, the Bat's broken back. So perhaps Superman's death may have had wider consequences not only on the DC universe but also on the industry itself, and despite Superman's death having wider consequences not only on the DC universe but also on the industry itself, it is still hard to not immediately think of this number before the Man of Steel's when considering superhero defeats. Because really, Superman just got punched into a coma and he still retained a lot coming out of that show. But Batman, on the other hand, after he had his back broken by Bane, his story took a very interesting turn and resulted in him having to return to a Gotham that was worse than when he left it, and his reputation was trashed. So, let's backtrack for some context. Occurring in the 1993-1994 story arc Nightfall, Bane, who had only recently been introduced into the comics, breaks Batman's back during a battle. Batman, who had been suffering from some major burnout at the time, is outsmarted by Bane, who cripples him, leaving Batman to find a replacement for himself. Now that Batman replacement is Azrael, whose much more violent methods turns Gotham against Batman, who all assume that Batman is just still the same Batman but has gone rogue. While the story arc results in Batman learning to lean on the trusted members of the Bat family more, the conflict between him and Bane almost broke his spirit as well, and has made for one of the most iconic images featuring the two. The whole arc took over a year to complete, and eventually, Batman was rehabilitated. See, much more believable than getting punched into a Kryptonian coma, just saying. And finally, in at number 1, Watchmen. Perhaps the one thing that's worse than being defeated by one of your equally intellectual arch enemies is being defeated by a teammate, and having that teammate actually help sort out the world better than you could have ever done. We're talking the Watchmen's defeat by one of their own, Adrian Veidt, aka Ozymandias. Now at the start of Watchmen, the group has been disbanded thanks to the Keene Act, which outlaws vigilantes. The whole story takes place in an alternate universe where Richard Nixon is still president, and asks Dr. Manhattan, an omnipotent superhero and the only one with real powers in the story, to intervene in Vietnam. So if that doesn't give you a clear idea on what this is, it is a dystopian society for sure. Set in an alternate version of the 80s on the verge of a nuclear war. And Ozymandias manages to find a way to make world peace happen. But he does that by obliterating parts of the Earth, which appears to be from aliens alien invaders, but really was just caused by him and created by him. But it brings nations together with a common enemy. In the film adaptation, instead of a giant alien creature, Veidt uses Dr. Manhattan's energy against him and frames him for the disasters. Either way, while this is all going on, the rest of the Watchmen heroes end up going on a hunt for answers as to why one of their members, the comedian, was murdered, which eventually brings them to Ozymandias and unravels all of this plan. But of course, it's too late. The heroes, minus Rorschach, agree to be quiet about it, because despite how horrible Veidt's actions were, he was right. He saved the planet. And Dr. Manhattan is forced to kill Rorschach in order to keep everything a secret. Alright, there we have it, friends. Now there are a few major events that we did not get the chance to cover on this list. Infinity War. So, be sure to give us a shout in those comments below if you'd like to see a part 2 of this list. Then, hey, while you're down there, why not show us some love and hit that thumbs up button? We also have a ton of videos on our channel that might tickle your fancy, and we'd love it if you hung out with us some more, so be sure to hit that playlist. In the meantime though, thanks for watching, friends. I'll catch you all in the next video.